Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started.
Visual line of sight, VLOS.
That's right. It sounds simple, maybe, but these documents show there's actually a lot under the surface. Some tricky aspects for sure.
So we're looking at what it actually means to keep eyes on your drone, your RPAS, according to the Canadian rules.
Exactly. We've got the regulations, the why behind them, FAQs.
Yeah.
Plenty to unpack.
And our goal here is to cut through that, pull out the key takeaways, the important bits you need to grasp, what VLOS requires in Canada and why it even matters.
Yeah, it's less about just memorizing rules and more about understanding the thinking behind them, the practical side.
Okay, let's get started. So the core concept, VLOS, what is it fundamentally?
Well, the sources define it pretty clearly. It's your ability to actually see your drone the whole time it's flying, and critically, without using any vision aids.
So just your own eyes, no screens, no binoculars.
Exactly. Direct visual contact from the moment it takes off until it lands. CCARS 901.11 is specific here. No FPV goggles replacing your eyes, no telescopes, no just watching the video feed.
Okay, but what about glasses or contacts if you need them to see normally?
Oh yeah, absolutely allowed. TP 15263 clarifies that. Corrective lenses just bring your vision back to normal. They don't enhance it beyond human standard.
Right.
The analogy in one source is good. If you normally wear glasses to drive, wear them when flying too. It's about enabling your natural sight.
Gotcha. And I saw this interesting point. Even using the zoom on your drone's camera feed doesn't count.
Correct. That's a common mix-up the documents highlight. You're looking at a screen, a digital picture, not the actual aircraft in the sky. That doesn't meet the VLOS requirement.
Okay, so why is this such a big deal? Why the intense focus on seeing the drone?
Fundamentally, safety and control. That's the recurring theme in all your sources. It's about collision avoidance first and foremost.
So you can spot other things in the air, manned planes maybe?
Exactly. Manned aircraft, helicopters, gliders, anything sharing that airspace. VLOS lets you or your observer physically scan and see those potential conflicts. But it's also about seeing hazards on the ground, people walking into the area, animals, unexpected obstacles, and, maintaining control if the drone does something unexpected.
Right. I noticed one source linked this back to the old see and avoid principle from traditional aviation, way back.
Yeah, it's a direct descendant of that. VFR flight rules, see and avoid. It's the same core safety idea applied to uncrewed aircraft, and it's pretty much a global standard aligns with ICO, GIRUS, those bodies.
Okay, but sometimes you can't keep your eyes glued to the drone. Maybe you're focused on the camera or flying FPV with goggles.
Right, and that's where the visual observer, or VO, comes into play.
Okay.
TP 15263 explains this. The pilot, the RPIC, can meet the VLOS requirement, or a dedicated visual observer can, as long as they're in constant communication.
And this is absolutely mandatory for FPV flying then?
100%. Non-negotiable for FPV. Flying with goggles is legal, yes, under the rules, but by definition, you can't maintain VLOS yourself while wearing them.
Makes sense. You're blindfolded to the outside world, essentially.
Pretty much. So you must have a VO who has that unaided, direct line of sight to the drone at all times.
I saw those memory aids, goggles on, spotter on. Pretty clear.
Yeah, it helps stick. And the VO's job isn't passive. They have real responsibilities. They need to maintain that unaided VLS, constantly scan the airspace, and be in real-time communication.
Real-time meaning?
Meaning instant. Voice communication, usually. No texting, no delays. They have to be able to warn the pilot immediately about any hazard and potentially direct them.
Does this person, the VO, need their own drone license?
No pilot certificate needed for the VO. But in the sources stress this, they need good vision, they need to be properly briefed on the flight plan, their specific duties, what to look for. Basically, they need to be competent.
So not just anyone standing nearby?
Definitely not. One source put it like, they don't need a license, But they better be sharp and speak up fast.
And they can't be doing anything else, right? Like operating the camera gimbal or something.
Exactly. No multitasking. Their only job is maintaining VLOS and communicating. Can't be the camera operator, can't be driving, can't be texting, full focus required.
But ultimately, the responsibility still lies with the pilot, the RPAC.
Always. Even if you have a VO, you as the pilot in command are fully responsible for the safety of the flight. You need to be ready to take back manual control instantly if needed.
Okay, now for the part that seems tricky, the sources really emphasize this. What happens if something blocks your view, even for just a moment?
Ah, yes, this is a major point. And where people often get it wrong. VLS is broken by any obstruction. Trees, buildings, hills, even temporary things like fog or smoke.
So if your drone flies behind a building, even just around the corner for a second,
You've lost VLOS. And unless you have specific BVLOS beyond visual line of sight authorization, you're operating illegally at that moment.
wow. One source said something like, if the drone ducks behind anything, you're out of bounds, even for 2 seconds. Is it really that strict? 2 seconds?
That's the interpretation based on the regulations and how they're enforced, yes. It catches a lot of people out, especially on exams. VLOS must be continuous.
Continuous, no breaks at all.
Exactly. There's essentially zero tolerance for even a momentary loss of sight. Think of that analogy. VLOS is like oxygen. You can't skip a breath and call it safe. It's a very strict interpretation.
Okay, that's critical to understand. What about other factors like distance? Is there a maximum range for VLOS?
There isn't a specific number, like 500 meters or anything, written down. The limit is practical, based on your eyesight. Meaning you have to be close enough to see the drone clearly with your unaided eyes, tell which way it's pointing, its orientation, understand its attitude, like if it's banking or level, know its direction of travel, and crucially, be able to see potential conflicts in time to react.
So if it just looks like a tiny speck in the distance?
Then it's likely too far. If you can't tell its orientation or judge its movement relative to other things, you probably don't have effective VLOS anymore.
And night flying. We know it's allowed for advanced operations with the right lights. How does VLOS work then?
Right. Night offs are allowed under SOR 2019-11 and TP 15263 with proper anti-collision and position lights, but the VLOS rule itself doesn't change.
So the lights help, but they don't replace seeing the drone.
Exactly. The lights make it possible to see the drone, but you still need to be able to visually judge its attitude, direction, or distance. Just seeing a flashing light isn't enough if you can't tell if it's coming towards you or moving away, for example. The sources say, lights help, they don't replace your eyes.
This really emphasizes planning, doesn't it? You can't just wing it.
Absolutely. Planning is key. The sources, especially TP 15263 and guiding stocks, stress that VLOS needs to be deliberate. You plan your flight path knowing where potential obstructions are trees, buildings, terrain features, and figure out how you'll maintain sight before you launch.
Using tools like NAV drone or aeronautical charts seems almost essential then.
Very helpful, yes. For understanding the terrain and potential blind spots in your operating area, planning for VLOS is part of responsible mission planning.
Okay, another potential pitfall mentioned. Relying just on your screen. The video feed, the map, the numbers. Why isn't that VLOS?
Because, again, we're looking at data, a digital representation, not the actual aircraft in its real-world environment. Transport Canada sees this as fundamentally different.
Right.
Flying purely by reference to the screen, what one source called data-only flying, requires different permissions, usually falling under BVLOS operations. Your live video feed doesn't satisfy the visual line of sight requirement.
It seems hard to prove after the fact whether someone maintained VLOS or not. How would Transport Canada investigate that?
It's not always easy, but they have tools. The sources suggest they can look at drone telemetry data GPS logs showing the flight path, cross-reference that with terrain maps or satellite imagery. They might review video recordings if available, flight logs, maybe even talk to witnesses.
So they can reconstruct the flight and see if the path likely went behind an obstruction.
Potentially, yes. The point is, simply saying I had VLOS might not be enough if the evidence suggests otherwise. Good planning and maybe even documentation showing how you maintain VLOS become important.
So what practical tips do the sources offer to help pilots actually do this effectively and stay compliant?
Several good ones. First, make your drone more visible. Bright lights, especially strobes at night, or high contrast paint or skins, anything that helps your eyes pick it up and track it against the background. Some studies apparently show this helps.
Makes sense. Extend your practical VLOS range.
Exactly. Also, using a pre-flight checklist specifically for VLOS, simple questions. Can I see it clearly from here? Is the planned path clear? Are comms working instantly? Can I take over control right now?
And if you are using multiple VOs, having a solid plan for handing off visibility between them without any gaps.
Crucial for continuity, and actively avoiding those known problem areas, flying too close to tree lines, behind buildings, over hills where you know you'll lose sight.
For pros, maybe having standard operating procedures, SOPs, that cover VLOS.
Definitely recommended in the sources, especially for commercial work. It shows you've thought about it and have a process.
And it's worth remembering, right, that even if you lose VLOS unintentionally, like a sudden wind gust pushes it out of sight, it's still technically a violation.
Correct. The responsibility is on the RPIC to maintain VLOS at all times. Intent doesn't really factor in if sight is lost.
Okay, let's pull this all together. If you're flying a drone in Canada, what's the main message from these sources about VLOS?
The absolute key takeaway is that VLOS is foundational for safe drone operations here. It means physically seeing the drone with your own unaided eyes continuously the entire flight, no gaps.
And understanding why the collision avoidance, the hazard spotting, maintaining control helps make sense of the strictness.
Absolutely. Knowing when you must use a VO, especially FPV, is critical. And realizing that maintaining VLOS isn't accidental, it requires careful, proactive planning before you fly.
So these rules, maybe a bit complex or nuanced sometimes, are ultimately about keeping the skies safe for everyone by making sure someone has eyes on the drone ready to react.
Precisely.
That pretty much wraps up our deep dive into Canadian drone VLS based on the materials you shared. We've seen it's much more than just keeping it close.
It's a specific regulatory standard deeply tied to fundamental aviation safety principles. Understanding it is key to flying legally and, more importantly, safely.
Which leaves us with something to think about. If VLOS requires you to judge the drone's attitude and direction, how well can the average person really do that at night, even with lights, beyond a certain distance? Is just seeing a light truly enough?
Or maybe this. Given how strict that continuous rule is, are there some common operating environments, like maybe flying low over rolling terrain or dense suburban areas where maintaining perfectly legal VLOS is actually incredibly difficult, almost impractical, without extremely careful planning, or maybe even a VO?
Definitely something to chew on before your next flight.
Food for thought. That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.